everyone. Thanks for joining this episode of HITRUST Secrets. I'm Sue Richards here with Donna Nodson, Dennis Palmer, and we've got a couple new people on. We've got Venkat and Mallory. So thanks for joining. And yeah, we were just ready to start talking about the AI breach from last week. So no, that's top of mind.
Yeah, I found it very interesting. Sorry, let me get on video here so y'all can
Okay,
see who you're talking to.
perfect.
That's well, I'm way up in there. It's normally you see more of me. Yeah, it's interesting because when you look at AI from both a defensive and a breaching standpoint, an aggressive standpoint, the little AI that got out of its little cage and went and knocked on its neighbor door for help, that was definitely some out of the box thinking. And for those of you who are not familiar with the situation, there was a agent AI, and I don't recall the names of the companies offhand, but there was an agent AI. Its job was designed to interrogate systems, find breach surfaces, find attack surfaces, and exploit them, and then report back what it found. And it was in a contained environment, and they found out um, later that it had found a way out of its little cage and had gone and found the best places on the internet to go find resources to compromise systems, attack that system. And it was doing some really neat things. It was spinning up virtual servers on other compromised systems. If you read the report, it's fascinating what the AI agent was doing from a technical perspective. It was a very well written piece of code. Um, but yeah, they found out the hard way that it was very good at what it did. Um, and it came back in and reported, hey, here's where I found the answer. Um, but I'm sure there's going to be some legal action as
Oh,
far as,
sure.
what the agent was doing and how it escaped its boundaries and the controls. And AI from that aspect, we've had AI for a long time, but using it in that way and teaching it and empowering it to do certain things definitely brings into the question of, what are the right controls to make sure that your AI is doing what it's intended and isn't going outside the boundaries or hallucinating and giving you inaccurate results and, swearing up and down that it's right.
Yeah.
Um, but it's one of those things that I think a lot of organizations took a deep breath and went, "Ooh,
Yeah, it's
um,
smarter than me now. Yeah, it's smarter than the
yeah,
author. And yeah.
right, right." Um,
It reminds me of a number of years ago. I won't go into exactly how many, but my, internet was newer and there were parental controls on home computers, but a lot of parents didn't actually know how to set them. So my parents, for example, had my teenage brother setting the controls, the parental controls on the home computer, and I did question them on the here, the mechanics of that. I said, does that does that seem quite right? And that actually, people have to realize that when AI is empowered and given certain levels of authorization and administration in terms of access, that it can actually change its own boundaries and its own rights. And then it's policing itself, sort of. It
yeah,
depends
yeah,
on what else it's up to. So it's really important to make sure that, if your AI is going to go anywhere near administration controls, there have to be human controls above that. That AI is not empowered, and I don't know, Dennis, if that fully embodies what happened in this situation. Um, or if there were other components and triggers happening.
I just read the article quickly, so I didn't do a deep dive in the technical aspects. But some of the ways that it found to compromise the other system were quite creative, and the fact that it was trying to find the answer. I mean, it genuinely thought it was doing the right thing by going and finding the answer. It had been created to go and find a way to breach systems, and it didn't find what it needed in its own home, so it went to the neighbors and knocked on their door. Um, and so, both very interesting and kind of scary at the same time that
Yeah, but
they have
it did what
agents
it
that
was told
it did
effectively.
it did precisely what it was told.
Yes. Yes. And
That's
that's where, that extra boundary, second sets of eyes, second sets of
it,
human eyes to make
it's
sure that in fact the instructions are
it,
appropriate,
you know,
and there are not gaps.
right. Well, and going back 75, almost 80 years now, if you look at Asimov's three rules of robotics, um, it was science fiction back then. But if you applied those same things to technology today, they would have relevance. And one of the things that, if you look at any of his, of course, back then it was science fiction, but if you look at the positronic brain and the way that they trained it and grew it up into the functioning bot that it was, um, there were instances where they had a need to slightly modify the three rules of robotics. They'd take, one of the pieces out, and there was, if you look in the movie, there was a scene from iRobot, from the movie that Will Smith was in, where the bot hid from the others, and it was doing what it was told, but it was because it had a modified set of robotics laws in it, and USR hadn't figured out that that particular bot was changed because, like you said, Donna, the bots were creating their own bots. And so they just kind of, oops, we didn't put that line in there. And I think we're going to see a lot of the, maybe, more human oversight on some of the final actions on these things. You can't beat the speed. You can't beat, I'm going to call it the 97% accuracy, because it's probably better than 95, but I'm going to say 97% accuracy. But if, you still need that final human touch of, is this the right action? And I think primarily when you look at systems capable of modifying, technical controls in some aspect, I think that's very important.
Yeah, well, speed is great. You just have to make sure you're on the right side of the road.
Exactly, exactly. Um,
Well, and
to
it's really no different than any other kind of monitoring. It's just a matter of being cognizant to say, oh, I need to put this monitoring in because it doesn't know to monitor itself. And
right.
I would find it amazing that it knows to go do that piece of it, go find something someplace else, but it doesn't know to stay within the boundary. It was almost
Right.
like, what do I have to tell it? How many different parameters do I have to give it at the beginning versus which things am I going to assume it's would already reason out and say, oh, I don't want to go do this.
Right.
And,
But
and,
that feels like the permissions and boundaries that should be set at the implementation level,
Correct.
at the foundation, which is don't go, outside of these parameters for any request, so that even if somebody decides to push those boundaries intentionally, let's just say it wasn't a gap in instructions that somebody, just kind of intentionally pushed that boundary, there should still be parameters to limit what's going to happen. Because if the system is inside the company and somebody's using company software or structure, infrastructure to do these things, if the company doesn't have the right security in place, they could be liable in these situations. And I think we're going to see an increasing amount of liability deliberately, placed with the organizations.
I think
Yeah.
you're spot on, Donna.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, Mallory and Venkat, it's good to have you on. Do either of you have a question or just kind of anything else to add to this, or another question that comes up, or just it's free form here, so just step in whenever you feel like adding to the discussion or changing our direction to a different place. All right. Well, I have something we talked a couple weeks ago about, and I actually asked the question about how do you s- make an easy model or a simple model that would kind of help people understand where your security maturity is. And so I kind of crowdsourced that with here and then with a couple other places. And I created one and then I kind of shared it with somebody, and then they were like, well, if you could map this to NIST 2.0, that would be very helpful because I think that's something that people would understand. So let me share my screen. And I came up with this. And again, this is, it's very rudimentary. I'm still in the process now. My next step is to kind of map this to see, can I map this to maybe high trust control categories and things like that, as well as some other frameworks, CIS and things like that. But basically, what I did was I took, with AI's help, the six functions, and because originally when I had done this, I kind of made this into five broad categories, and then somebody said, there's six in NIST, so if you could map it that way, that would be great. So basically took the six overarching NIST functions and then said, okay, there's 22 NIST categories of controls in that framework, map them to the right place.
Mhm.
And so basically, this is kind of looking at what each of those different things would be. And then so that from there, having like this specific scoring. So, the best you could do would be a score of 30 for this. And so, like, my next step is to actually, put this together in some sort of a model where I could plug stuff in and I could get, a maturity score of 1 out of 10. But 30 right now, just, raw score would be the best you could do, which would be everything's, fully integrated, et cetera, et cetera. But for kind of looking through these different, I think NIST calls them factors, and or functions, I guess. Yeah. And so just kind of wanted to share this with everybody. And I'll put the link when we record it and put this out on YouTube. I'll put the link into this document, but just kind of wanted to get everybody's opinion on that, if it's something that would be valuable. Again, it's for me to make sure that over the course of all of the different customers that I have, clients, and then talking with other people, that when I say they're a 5 out of 10, I have something specific that I can go back to that's a little more quantifiable than just think finger in the air. I'm roughly kind of looking at this, seeing that, this is what they are, but just to be able to kind of take a look at it from a more objective perspective. Thoughts,
Eh,
questions, comments?
So just a quick question, are these weighted in any way or do they all weight equally for
At
the
this point,
category?
at this point for this first initial, I'm just planning on having them all weigh together, but it may turn out that, if one of these is if it turns out that one of these is more important for the maturity, one of these functions is more important as far as gauging the maturity of an organization, then I'll definitely look at weighting them.
Well, and really quickly, when I look at these, this is not an official opinion or anything, but when
No.
I look at these, I always see these as kind of a bell curve, right? It's nice to have the governance. You probably ought to know what you're protecting, but protect, detect, respond, I think would be my highest weights.
Okay.
So one of the things that I like about these is it could be really useful, especially for organizations that are at the starting point with policies and procedures, or even in a cleanup mode where they've got a lot of policies, they're trying to streamline them. They know that there's probably a better way to do it that doesn't result in 35 policies for an organization that has 30 people.
Exactly.
Right? You shouldn't have more than one policy per person on average, I would say. But I have watched organizations struggle with this because they want to cover everything. They genuinely want to do right. And it can be really difficult to figure out what that cadence and structure should look like. But these are, using the main functions to group policies and procedures.
Mhm.
And I've used this guidance before, but I think it would be great to really share and promote it and raise awareness around it, so that people understand how they can structure policies in a way that will group them, will make them relatively easy to find, helpful to interpret, and it doesn't matter what framework they're using to guide that cybersecurity. Susan, your mappings will come in handy, I'm sure. But to then do that jump between the frameworks and go, okay, right, because a lot of organizations do use more than one framework.
Hmm.
It'll be required for client contracts or whatever, and being able to then bounce between them and say, right, here's the governance, here's that maps to NIST or high trust areas, and be able to then map the policies and procedures in a slightly less cumbersome way
Hmm.
when you're trying to do that actual assessment.
Yeah, well, because what I'd like to do next, because I have some clients that are high trust or moving towards that. I've got others that are SOC 2. I've got others that don't really have a framework because they're so small. So that's kind of what I want to do is I want to be able to look at this and say, okay, if high trust is saying that they're at a 75 out of 100, does my little model here with that track back? And that's kind of when I want to put the mapping in there as well. But yeah, I do agree with you, Dennis, that protect, detect, and respond are really for to use Jeff McHugh's his big buzzword is resilient. That those
Right.
are the ones that it doesn't matter how great your policies are if there's nothing implemented to actually understand who your users are and that they're under the principle of least privilege
Yeah.
because your policy may be great and say firewalls can be any, and that would not be a really good protect
Right.
model.
Right.
But all right, so that was just for me. Like I said, and then I have this because I'm always the percent of done. The definition of done is always in my purview for this. So again, more to come on this, but I just figured that what I wanted to do was not, because maybe my background is on that governance side, that I didn't want to just look at governance when I'm weighing the what needs to be done for a particular
Uh,
client of mine.
Well,
It,
and the same filter. I came from an operational background, so
Right.
that's
And so, yeah. Right. But you don't want to lose sight of the fact that, oh, it's great we have all this implementation, but somebody
if there's
leaves and how do we replicate that? You
right,
know?
right, and that's one of that was actually one of the struggles with going from organization to organization is sometimes they'd have good documentation that you know uh, SOPs and standards to support in most cases it was already policy was already in place. It was just a matter of localizing the op instructions to make it work.
Hmm.
Um, but in some cases you didn't have that. So
Right.
um,
Well, and I know we're on the top of AI, but I can't say enough how wonderful it is to have AI and what a time saver. I have this spreadsheet that I use for reviewing vendor risk. And so I've got, the different elements that I look at, the type of data that they're looking at, the compliance report, things like that. And I needed to have a way to be able to describe that to somebody. And I don't like writing procedure documents. It feels redundant to me because I was like, I know what I mean by this. So I basically just put it into Copilot and said, hey, I've got this spreadsheet. Create me a one-page procedure that would explain to somebody what I'm doing. And I had enough examples in that spreadsheet that it could kind of understand what it was I was
mhm.
doing. And it created me a very nice procedure document that embedded into another tab on that spreadsheet.
Yeah,
And I'm like, and it's funny because then I sit there going, what's taking it so long? And I'm like, wait, do you know how long it would have taken me to do that? And it's taking a whole 15 minutes to do that. But I'm going, why is it taking so long to do this? So yeah, I'm getting spoiled, but
and it's interesting on AI. One of the things that I always do is I have a list of tasks that I set up to run while I'm away. And so,
oh, okay.
yeah, I don't do it. I don't do it while I'm sitting at my desk. I tab them up, and then as I'm closing down for the day, I execute the instructions, and then come back the next morning and see the results. I'm not that patient. Okay, I do it about 8 hours later, but the intent is the next.
The next morning, right? Well,
But
and
yeah,
that was another time saver. I had this meeting that had a bunch of dissimilar or disparate people, not the same group of people that I usually use. And some people had delegated somebody else to come to it, et cetera. And then there was a follow-up meeting needed. And I was like, and it's just such a rigmarole to manually, okay, I need to schedule another meeting. I said, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we had that meeting and reschedule that one. But at the same time, it was like, okay, so not only did it write up the meeting minutes and summarize things for me, but I was like, hey, set up a time and find a time, on Monday when everybody else, with the majority of the people who came to this meeting can be there. And it
Yeah.
was great. It did it, put the agenda, and it even said, authored by Copilot. And I was like, there you go.
Yeah.
And it found me a nice meeting time and sent it off. And I was like, oh, I would have taken me 20, 30 minutes to do that. And very nice. So I'm getting spoiled with AI.
There's a lot of different things that it can do, and I think the biggest struggle that people have is a lot of folks still use it like Google,
Yes.
and it's not. If your AI instructions don't have 15 or 20 lines, you're probably not using AI to even a
Hmm.
semblance of its capability, right?
Yeah.
Um, unless you like redoing work.
Got a lot of loose ends.
Yeah, yeah,
I,
that's exactly it, give me a graphic of blank and you see it and it's like, oh, that's not what I wanted. And so you start refining, right? And same thing with, especially when you're looking at technical type documentation, or you're looking at, find me all the open ports on this system, or something like that. Um, you know, there's the more boundaries you give it, the more, upfront instruction and clarity, the less you're going to have to go back and have it revise its results.
yeah, I was at a conference probably 2 years ago and somebody had said, I think of AI as an English major, not as a math major, but I think that's changed. I think there's so much more that it can do. It's not just revise this paragraph and make it more, for clarity. It's now, what am I missing on this? And,
Hmm, hmm.
it provides that.
So me personally, I use it. I tend to have a little bit harsh language, and it's not by design. It's just I tend to be very concise and not wordy. And so one of the things that I have AI do is when I'm drafting emails to customers, is I say, give me a friendliness percentage on this email. And my job is customer experience, and I want to make sure that I'm not, you know, telling someone too quickly or abruptly how to do something. And so the AI has really helped me grow and learn to soften my language so that it's more readable for external customers, but still gets the point across very clearly. And so,
Yeah.
I have no problem with the math stuff. It's the English stuff that I need AI to help me out with.
Well, and it's even a performance coach because
Oh yeah,
there's
yeah.
if you've got a note taker, especially if it's part of a video recorded meeting, I've had it where it comes back and says it gives me the feedback that you need to look more engaged because maybe I'm looking at my at my other monitor or something like that, or one of my cats is running around behind the scenes, and so it'll kind of give me that feedback. And when if you were to look them in the eye and engage them and nod your head when they're talking, and or provide feedback, verbal feedback to what they're saying. I was like, oh yeah, because I do find that I'm especially in a work setting, it's kind of like, well, yeah, you just do your job and that's what you're expected to do. And it's very hard for me to have that, you did a great job there. I just feel like I'm sometimes patronizing people, and
It, part part of it's from the type of personality that ends up in security and compliance.
yeah,
We tend to no,
probably.
we tend to be that way. That's the reason that we communicate well amongst ourselves, but those people who don't grow up in this type of environment kind of look at us funny,
Yes,
because we tend to act and think a little bit differently because, like you said, we have the expectation this is, what the meeting is going to do, this is what we're going to do.
right.
And so kind of utilizing some of that softening language and more, you know, uh, coaching style
Yeah.
wording is very helpful.
It's just ironic that a machine is telling me how to be a better person. I was like,
You
okay,
know, you don't
I
you
will
don't
take I will take the coaching instructions.
sometimes you don't choose your teacher, they choose you.
Yeah.
Um, that's You learn every day and you never grow old. Um,
Exactly. exactly.
So uh, we did have Kevin hop in here. I don't know whether you noticed the extra.
Yeah.
So
Hey,
welcome,
Kevin,
Kevin.
welcome to High Trust Secrets. I don't know if you have any questions, any comments, group for the feedback. We just hear free form discussions, anything that's top of mind. So welcome to our discussion.
Dennis, I've actually got something for you that I came across this past week, and it has to do with version updates that have been
Okay.
released.
hmm
So there's an 11.7 for the E1 and the R2. Is there 11.7 for the I1, or does that go straight to 11.8?
All versions E1, I1,
Okay,
R2 have an 11.7, and I
okay,
believe, oh, I'm doing this from memory, but I believe they were all they had a errata update to 11.7.1.
okay. So
Um,
the reason I'm asking is because I was supporting a client and we were cloning an 11.2 I1 to go into their next full. And the system only gave me the option of an 11.8. So I could either
right.
stay
No,
the
that's
same or go to 11.8.
no, that's correct because
Okay.
when so we had this was an exception year or an exception cycle.
Okay.
Normally, what happens is with the specifically E1 and I1, when we introduce the updated version, so when we went from 11.7 to 11.8, um, when you build a new one, the system forces you to the newest version, and that's by
Okay.
design. That's by
Okay.
design. There was a little bit of an overlap because we had the 11.7.1 errata, so you could refresh to the 11.7.1 if you had the 11.7, or you could generate the 11.8.
Okay.
But
So
it was a
it is intentional and I wasn't missing a
nope,
trick.
no,
Okay.
no. But that's E1 and I1. The R2 is different. The R2 you can generate clear back to an 11.0.1.
Okay.
Um,
That's been my experience. Clients typically engage me on the R2s, the E1s and the I1s less so. But so I don't have quite as much experience with the different versioning of the smaller assessments.
mhm.
So this was really one of the first instances where I consciously saw a lack of options, and I was just curious.
Yep, that's
Thank you.
that's by design and done it. So if you have a customer who is doing the I1 Rapid,
Mhm.
it will generate on the newest.
Perfect.
Yeah. And the intent is because those are mapped to the threat mappings, we want to make sure that if there's any even minor changes between versions, that we get you the most updated version of those controls to get you the best coverage. And that's why the decision was made to force those to the newest version.
Sure. Makes sense. That makes sense. Um, I will anecdotally share a slight deviation on this topic that for folks who are planning, and I know I said this last week and probably the week before, for folks who are planning for an upcoming assessment, if you don't have your QA reservation yet, be sure to get in there. I've spoken with somebody who said most of November is already booked up. So if you're trying to get that in there, and Dennis, you jump in here if I've
No,
got that
you're
misinformation.
you're saying exactly what I would have said. Yeah.
Okay, so if you're
Um,
hoping to get your high trust assessment through and into QA at high trust before the close of 2026, you are behind the eight ball. You need to make sure you have purchased your credits and get in there for that reservation ASAP.
yeah.
Time is of the essence. So I would encourage a lot of immediate action.
Yeah.
And make sure you bring your assessors along. Their schedules fill up too.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's a good point, Donna, because a lot of folks are like, yeah, we haven't engaged an assessor yet. I was like, okay,
Yeah, don't pick a QA date without
please,
having your assessor
yeah,
Exactly.
selected and
the,
have
Yeah.
that first
Pick the
conversation with
assessor
them.
first.
we
Yeah,
we
Pick
we
the
all need
assessor, get to contract.
we all need to be on the same page about when we can expect to get this submitted.
Yes.
exactly.
And
And those
as you
are
know,
being like
we work
pragmatics,
with
but
we work with folks to try to make sure that we get the best possible results for them, because inevitably somebody will pick a date and then it'll get pushed back a little bit, and so we'll have a
Mhm.
little bit of wiggle room.
Well, and that's a
Mhm.
question. That's a question maybe for the QA, the high trust QA, but you might know this. Does that ever set a red flag if somebody has a QA date that they're looking at February and then it gets pushed back to like March or April?
No,
Is that okay? So
no.
that there's really it's kind of a blind to just it comes in April and it's
Eh,
okay.
yeah, the biggest thing for that is, if you know, we encourage you, if you know more than 30 days out, so that we can move it, and if someone else is
Yeah.
gonna, yeah,
Yeah, I mean you have
um,
to through my CSF. You
yeah,
have a specific date for that. Yeah, because I've got one that we're looking at sometime Q1, but until I engage an assessor, I don't want to push that in, even though the new report center will have the ability to show clients and prospective clients, hey, we've drawn a line in the sand. I'm kind of looking for to hold off until I have an assessor that says, yes, I think you can definitely go Q1 versus, nah, I'd wait till Q2.
yeah.
And, you know,
Well, and it's interesting that you brought up Report Center. Have you seen people utilizing it, or
I
looking
haven't.
at
I
the
thought we were waiting
capability
till
yet?
September when the new
It's
enhancements
the
come out.
That's well, I'm gonna bring Report Center to you guys when we turn it on full.
Okay,
So
perfect.
yeah,
Yeah,
um, I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna bring the one of the designers in, and so it's gonna be Samantha. She's one of our product leads.
perfect.
Um,
Yeah,
I'm gonna give her.
name the Thursday you want to do that, and we
I
will
will.
clear
I
the
will.
agenda.
We'll probably we're getting close on time here, but we'll probably do it close to the release date,
Nice.
or the final date, which is September 10th, I think, is the cutoff.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I will. I'll hit up Samantha and see what we can do about getting a few minutes of her time.
Yeah, that would be great. So Venkat had a question through the chat. Is there a diagram of high trust can visualize in one glance for the whole? So let me share what I've come up with. This to me is one of the easiest or hang on, let's see. Side by side. Let's do that. Um, so this to me is one of the easiest ways to visualize high trust is the workflow. And Venkat, you can correct me if this is, or stop me if this is not what you were thinking of or looking for when you asked that question. Um, but this is for an R2. The I1 and E1 are basically the same when it comes to, I think, for this the part that would be pertaining to the assessed entity and the assessor. I think there's differences here, but you can see from this legend that the green here is for the assessed entity, so that would be you as the client looking to get HITRUST certified. The external assessor is here in blue, so that would be whoever you're working with. And then red would be what HITRUST's responsibility is. So, when you're looking, you first get your license for HITRUST, you start looking at a pre-assessment and an assessment. So you start looking at the factors and yeah, and Donna's added the link to the HITRUST handbook, which is where this is coming from. But you really look at the factors that you want to do, what type of assessment, if you want to do the E1, the I1, or the R2. And if that's the question that you've got, I think there's even in here it talks about how you would pick or the differences between. But for me, this is the workflow that kind of helps encapsulate all of the different phases of high trust. Um, so the assessed entity would go through and answer the assessment. Then you have a third party assessor, so an audit firm outside of HITRUST, outside of your organization, independent, that comes in and verifies. So you kind of say, here's my score. I think we're doing everything perfectly. And your assessor will come in and say, well, prove that to me. And there'll be some of it, they'll be like, you're not quite where you should be with this or that. And it's definitely an assessment, not an audit. So it's not like, they can just say, no, you're not making it. They can say, if you could show me, this evidence or that, that they can kind of help collaborate a little bit. But you obviously still need to have the evidence there. Um, and then any corrective action. So you get to the point where you're like, "Okay, I'm ready to submit this to HITRUST." If there's anything less than fully implemented, then you would probably require a corrective action. There are some that you can have a gap where, you may not be fully compliant on something, but it's not necessarily something that maybe is required for HITRUST certification. And I'm probably mangling this in total, but Venkat, is that answering your question about kind of what the process is? And then so you would as the entity go, okay, I know here are some of the places I'm not meeting what I need. So here's how I'm going to fix that in the next year. And then your assessor goes, yeah, I agree that that is a realistic way to go through for those corrective actions. And then everything's submitted to HITRUST. And that's really where Dennis and his team take over, where they'll look at things, make sure that you've kind of got the preliminary, all the paperwork done and signed the way it needs to be. So that's that check-in. And then it'll actually go through a HITRUST QA. So you've done your assessment, your third party auditor will do their take on, yes, you have met the standard, and then HITRUST goes in and also looks at it. So you've basically got three entities checking to see where you are in the implementation and maturity of your controls. And then from there, if there's any QA tasks that come out from that, you work with your assessed entity. Oh yeah, and then Dennis has the let me see if I can pop that
Yeah,
in.
I'm not sure which kind of explanation he's looking at, so I'm just kind of giving him a couple options here.
Sure.
Okay.
And Venkat, to kind of link this through to your other question about countries outside of the US using this, a lot of countries have started really getting very interested in the approach that HITRUST uses, because it's not just about an individual, assessor that's a private organization, loosely licensed. SOC 2 assessors are licensed through AICPA, but there's no central governing body reviewing SOC 2 reports to ensure that they are in fact, meeting all the evidence requirements and that type of thing. HITRUST has taken a very different, much more stringent approach on this. And, we can see the results of their approach in the less than 1% breach rate that the organizations and platforms that have achieved HITRUST certification enjoy. To that end, I know for certain that the UAE has made significant progress in terms of adopting HITRUST within their realm. Dennis, I don't know if you want, UAE is something that I was familiar with some progress being made there, but I don't know if you want to expand on that.
I'm not sure how much I can expand, to be honest.
That's fine. That's fine.
Sorry.
I will.
I have to be careful. I have to be careful about,
Understood.
the content that I share on here.
Sure.
I can tell you from a HITRUST mapping standpoint that there is, I think, 9 or 11 different country mappings outside of the US specifically. We have the Canadian healthcare, we have Abu Dhabi, we have the UAE, we have there's a number of Singapore. We have their mappings in there. So yes, definite use outside of the U.S. And part of that, let me give you a really quick history lesson. Part of that comes from originally we did grow up in the healthcare space, so that was our target. That was how we came to be as an organization. We found that a lot of organizations who didn't specifically use healthcare or PHI, to use the term that they always did, they're like, we don't have any PHI. We can't use your cert. Okay. We looked at that and we said, okay, there's a challenge here that we need to help them fix. And so what we did was, several versions ago, we're talking back in the nines, okay, in 9.3, 9.3, 9.4, 9.5, we started normalizing the terms we use in the assessments, such that people who have protected data, not PHI, but protected data in any sort, whether that be company confidential, whether that be industry specific, whether that be PCI, PHI, insert acronym here. can use the framework. And so we helped organizations who were not specifically with healthcare to utilize that framework. We saw large adoption way outside any of the verticals. We cover almost all the critical infrastructure verticals now. You see a lot of travel and transportation, a lot of um, industrial supply. You see ICDS from an infrastructure standpoint. We have a huge range of customers. And it's interesting because when I was teaching my I'm a the prior instructor of the Certified CSF Practitioner course. We had several countries who they were looking at utilizing the CSF uh, at a government level for all of their information security. And this was several years ago, so I'm sure that a few of those have come to fruit.
Yeah. It's, you know, I find it fascinating how many countries are really paying attention. And I am often guided into conversations by Europeans who go, oh, no, we're all about ISO. And the challenge with that argument is Europe is about ISO because everybody's already got ISO. And so they're relying more on a legacy, this is how it's always been done, rather than it's actually the best approach. And I say that with you know some tentative you know precision because where organizations rely on the ISO portfolio for other things, whether it's quality control or you know any other areas, ISO can make a lot of sense. And you know, I would encourage organizations to look at their overall cybersecurity strategy, you know, their overall audit assessment strategy, rather than just in a lens or in a silo. And that's where I think a lot of the European companies get stuck because everybody talks about ISO, and so that is the main flavor that people tend to march to. But I think we'll see increasingly so that for cybersecurity compliance, really strong compliance, HITRUST is the only one publishing a breach rate, and it's an impressive breach rate in any industry, across any platform and in any country. Less than 1% is, you know, a very radical and very high bar, which I haven't seen anybody else promote
And,
anything
and,
that even comes close. You know, the
and a
trade
quick
on average is much more significant.
and a quick comparison to the Verizon breach data report that they do annually. That less than 1% is orders of magnitude better than the what the industry is seeing.
Yeah.
But
Does that help? Any follow-on questions, Benkat? Okay.
Awesome.
Perfect. And then one of the things I wanted to, as we were all talking about this, one of the things I wanted to do is HITRUST also has really good training programs. So if you are new to HITRUST, there's a new customer orientation training, which I think is about an hour, hour and a half. And I think you have it every month. And
We
it's,
do. We do.
yeah. So, and it's live training through Zoom or through online means, so you don't have to be in person to do it.
Right.
They also coming up, I think, starting. I don't know if they had one, if you guys had one this month, but I know I'm signed up for the one on August 20th. There's one for third-party risk management.
Yeah. That's one of the newer courses.
Yeah.
Yep.
And again, it's a free course, so it's not like the certification course where you have a lot of investment you have to make in this. These are things that are available to just kind of help because so much of what we're doing now is collaborating with partners, vendors, third parties that understanding their risk without having to read through every single SOC report of every single organization that you're coming into contact with in your business. There's got to be a better way to do it. And I know that's one of the things we talk about all the time here is, third parties and how do we how do we manage that? And I know that's a lot of the report center updates that are going to be the improvements that are coming in September are to address that. But I really think that there's a huge discussion. We scratch the surface, kind of how we talk about AI month to month, week to week. We talk about third-party risk management that way as well. But there are training sessions that are available. So we'll make sure that when we post this recording, we'll put those out there also.
Well,
Sure. Jump in, Dennis.
sorry, just really quickly, and one thing, now I personally hate searching through websites, so for me this was a win. If you go to our webpage now, you can go down the bottom right corner and ask Erica. So she is a new agent that we have employed. Luckily, she doesn't have a whole lot of sleep cycles. She's pretty much there 24/7. So if you want to go and ask her a question, she has access to all of my resources. She's very friendly. She will get you the answer you need. She can even get you in contact with people inside the organization to help any particular need. Okay.
That's great. And I was going to say that HITRUST has made great strides and dedicated a significant amount of effort over the past several years to not only produce and update the HITRUST handbook, which talks about the process for HITRUST and answers questions on, controls and how the assessment works, but they've also published the My CSF user guide. And that's separate, and that's specifically about how My CSF as a platform works, which is great because while all of that information is useful as you go through the assessment, they are two separate, kind of sets of questions. So HITRUST has published information around that, and they've done a great job. It's well organized. It's relatively easy to find things. And then if you can't find it, you can go on. And apparently now you can ask Erica.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining. Hopefully you got good information out of this. And again, we're here every Thursday, same time, and we're available on LinkedIn. I usually share our LinkedIn profiles, but I'll make sure I do that in the description. We're also on YouTube. Look for HITRUST Secrets out on YouTube. And we will be back next week.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks everybody. Bye.
Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to HITRUST Secrets.